The Women's Suffrage Movement in England by Emily Spencer. When did the inequality of women begin? Women's inequality began during the hunter-gatherer era. Men were naturally stronger, so they could hunt larger animals. Women provided 75% of the tribe's food, however their jobs were not prestigious like the men's work. Pregnancy and nursing also limited women by not allowing them to go on large animal hunts. When did women in England decide that they should be equal to men? The idea that women should have equal rights to men took root in the late 1800s. When England became involved in World War I, men went off to war, and women had to take over their masculine jobs such as factory and farm work. What was the suffrage movement in England? The suffrage movement was a large nationwide movement in many countries, including England. The movement's goal was to win rights and equality for women, especially the right to vote. The women's suffrage movement began in England in the early 1900s and debatably ended in 1928, when women won the right to vote. What methods were used during the English women's suffrage movement? Lobbying was a method used to sway political leaders and government officials to support women's rights. Petitioning was used during this movement to gain support from the public for women's rights. Parades, pageants, street speeches, and mass meetings were all methods used in the British women's suffrage movement to spread their ideas to the public and make them more widely accepted. Picketing was another major method used in the English women's suffrage movement. Women used this technique to demonstrate the need for equal rights for women. Some women resorted to vandalism and even burned down establishments that did not support the equality of women. Proponents of the women's suffrage movement in England. Suffragettes were women who dedicated their time and effort to supporting and promoting the women's suffrage movement in England and in other countries. Most women at this time supported the idea of equality for their gender, however some did not. Women's suffrage was still somewhat of a radical idea. Key women in the English women's suffrage movement. Emily Davison was a major advocate and supporter of the women's suffrage movement in England. She was fatally injured when she threw herself in front of the King's horse to attach a pro-suffragette banner to it. She was a martyr for the women's suffrage movement in England. Emmeline Pankhurst was an extreme suffragette. She was famous for saying, "Only the loss of life would put an end to the intolerable torture of women." Pankhurst formed the women's suffrage group known as the Women's Social and Political Union. Elizabeth Anderson was another suffragette who helped the suffrage movement take large gains in England. She was the first woman to gain medical certification in England. She employed women in her hospital and encouraged other establishments to do the same. What was gained from the English women's suffrage movement? The English women's suffrage movement gained the right for women to vote in England. It also gained more freedoms and equalities for women in everyday life, including the workplace. The U.S. and other countries also had suffrage movements, which gained these same rights for women in their countries. Women's suffrage today. Women enjoy most of the same rights as men in Western societies today. Women are still not always treated equally to men in the workplace. Oftentimes, women will make less wages than men for doing the same job. Also, sexual harassment of women is higher in the workplace and is an issue that needs to be addressed. Successful women today. Women have come a long way since the early 1900s. Today, women as a whole are more educated than men. Many women have started successful businesses and organizations. Women have now reached Forbes' top 10 most powerful people and top 10 richest people in the world lists. And here are my sources.